When did it start being called World War II? Wars are named for different reasons, ranging from the location, the weather, or for political terms. However, there are several theories surrounding how the 6-year conflict between the Axis and the Allies came to be known as World War II. Even before breaking out, World War II was linked to its predecessor, originally called the Great War in Europe and known as World War I in the rest of the world. By the 1930s, the rising conflict was seen by most as a localized affair involving mainly England, Germany, France, Poland, and the Soviet Union. However, by the time Japan began to taunt America and England into the Pacific War, other nations finally seemed to notice that this was much larger in scale. The term World War II was first mentioned by Time magazine in its June 12, 1939 issue, in which the publication used the words to describe the seemingly inevitable war. Still, the first official use of the term came in their September 11, 1939 issue, published 10 days after the conflict started. It read, quote, "World War II began last week at 5:20 a.m. Friday, September 1st, when a German bombing plane dropped a projectile on Puck, a fishing village and airbase in the armpit of the Hel Peninsula." The first political figure to use the term Second World War was American President Franklin D. Roosevelt during an official speech in 1941. His fellow Americans quickly followed suit, and other nations, such as the United Kingdom, continued to simply call it the war until the late 1940s. Although Roosevelt helped popularize the name, he wasn't entirely satisfied with it. The following year, he asked the public to propose alternate terms. In less than a month, the War Department received 15,000 submissions, with names ranging from the War for Civilization to the War Against Enslavement. Still, the nicknames didn't have much staying power. As the terms World War II and Second World War spread throughout the world, the appendage one, or first, was then added to the previous conflict, officially binding both wars for eternity. Where did the Axis name come from? From the cold beaches of Normandy to the misty islands of the South Pacific, the Axis and the Allies battled each other for years. And although hundreds of stories of their epic battles, heroes, and villains are common knowledge, many people are unfamiliar with the origin of the alliance's names, particularly the Axis one. The term Axis was first publicly mentioned by Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. On November 1, 1936, he outlined a formal agreement between his country and Nazi Germany during an official speech. While addressing the crowd, Prime Minister Mussolini stated that, quote, "This Berlin-Rome vertical line is not an obstacle, but rather an axis around which can revolve all those European states with a will to collaboration and peace." Still, the first political leader to mention the term behind closed doors was Hungarian Prime Minister Gyula Gombos, who hoped to create an alliance between his nation, Italy, and Germany in the 1930s. However, the politician died less than a month before the official Rome-Berlin Pact was announced. As Italy and Germany extended their network of political alliances, Japan signed the Tripartite Pact in September of 1940, joining forces until they each gave in to the Allies one by one. By then, many of the citizens within the Axis countries, their governments, and media outlets had already been referring to themselves as Axis for years, including in official records. In 1943, the Germans launched Fall Achse, or Case Axis, an operation to forcibly disarm the Italian armed forces after their armistice with the Allies on September 3rd. The Allies also used to refer to the joint effort as the Axis, particularly the United States, where media outlets and President Franklin D. Roosevelt used the word to connotate a single evil entity, terrifying the rest of the world. Why didn't Spain join the Axis? Although General Francisco Franco, the ruler that emerged from the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, had ideas that were undeniably aligned with fascism, he refused to endorse the ideology for years. Despite the pressure, Spain remained neutral throughout World War II, while still trying to help the Axis powers in some way, and while struggling with their own unsteady economy. After meeting in 1940 to discuss Spain's alliance with the Axis, Adolf Hitler and Francisco Franco could not agree on anything. For Hitler, Franco's demands to rule Gibraltar and several French colonies after defeating the Allies were too greedy and potentially unacceptable to the pro-German Vichy government. On the other hand, Franco was beginning to notice that as 1940 wore on, the Allies were only becoming more assertive and resilient. Still, most Spanish press remained pro-German throughout the conflict. The primary way Spain influenced World War II was through volunteers who had previously served in the Spanish Civil War. Each Spanish man paralleled the side on which they had once fought. Over 18,000 nationalist soldiers volunteered to fight with the Axis, on the condition that they fight against the Soviets rather than the Western Allies. In addition, Franco also provided materials to refuel and resupply German U-boats. By doing so, Franco assisted Hitler while somewhat maintaining peace with the Allies, who were already working hard to ensure Spain didn't join the war by using as many trading blockades and economic incentives as they could. By the time the Cold War broke out, the top priority in the West was defeating communism, and American and British politicians decided it was for the best to avoid discussing Franco's prior partnership with Germany. Francisco Franco remained in power for 30 years after World War II ended, turning into the last survivor of the early 20th century legendary dictators. Why didn't Stalin anticipate an attack from Germany? Despite being sworn ideological enemies, the Soviet Union and Germany signed a non-aggression pact in 1939. Once he was confident that the USSR wouldn't intervene if Nazi Germany invaded Poland, Adolf Hitler launched World War II a few days later. As the war raged on, several invasions followed as both nations occupied the European land between them, all the while remaining in peace. The Soviets even considered entering negotiations to become the fourth Axis power. Then, in 1941, Germany launched a massive attack codenamed Operation Barbarossa on the Soviet Union, taking the Soviets by surprise, including the famously paranoid Joseph Stalin. Only a few months after signing the pact with Germany, the Soviet leader began to receive several warning signs about an impending attack, but he ignored them. These signs included messages from President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who both believed Hitler would turn on the USSR shortly after conquering France. Stalin also ignored his own spies, as well as reports from German planes repeatedly violating Soviet airspace. The Soviet dictator firmly believed that the Germans wouldn't fight on two fronts, which caused their demise in World War I. It wasn't until June 21, 1944, when a German soldier defected and warned the Soviets of the upcoming attack, that Stalin finally took the matter seriously. But that was too late. The following day, the Germans struck at dawn, bombing previously reconnoitered targets from the Baltic to the Black Sea, and easily defeating the unprepared Soviet resistance. In less than a month, the invading force had pressed more than 400 miles into Soviet territories, attacking and capturing hundreds of thousands of Red Army soldiers, along with countless innocent Jews and other vulnerable minorities. By winter of 1944, the Soviets finally reached their pre-attack line, and millions of lives were lost in one of the most brutal battles of World War II. Who was the last leader of the Third Reich? Although Adolf Hitler took the Nazi power to glory and established the Third Reich in 1933, he was not Germany's last ruler. Although Hitler's final days in a bunker are commonly associated with the end of the war in the European theater, the Third Reich actually survived him by 7 days. By the time Hitler took his own life on April 30th, 1945, both presumptive successors to the job, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring and head of the SS Heinrich Himmler, had become persona non grata due to behavior the Führer considered disloyal. Consequently, Hitler issued one last order before passing away and chose naval officer Admiral Karl Dönitz as his heir. The announcement shocked the entire country, mainly top Nazi Party associates, who believed one of theirs should have been chosen as the successor. In fact, many did not know of Dönitz's existence until the announcement was made. Dönitz later claimed that the Führer made this surprising choice, quote, because he felt, doubtlessly, that only a reasonable man with an honest reputation as a sailor could make a decent peace. The admiral then governed the remains of the crumbling Third Reich from the town of Flensburg, and although Dönitz tried to extend the war as long as possible, there was little he could do. After several days of negotiations with General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Germany finally surrendered on May 7, 1945, only a week after Hitler's demise. The so-called German government would continue standing for a few weeks, as the Allies believed that the population would rather obey their own commander's instructions. Admiral Dönitz was eventually judged at the Nuremberg trials and received a 10-year prison sentence. He lived until 1980. Thank you for watching our Dark 5 channel. If you enjoyed our video, please give us a like, and don't forget to subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more exciting historical content.